Thank you very much. I can confirm the live stream started. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this session of the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 23rd of October 2024. Before we get going into the agenda items, I'll just, for the sake of anybody listening and members of the committee, just go through the usual announcements. So if I can please remind everybody present, this meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and then this recording is going to be archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please use the remote hand function? And if a participant raises their hand via that remote function and subsequently I don't invite them to speak, please can they then turn their camera on or place a message in the chat function? When you are invited to speak, please can all participants ensure their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be both seen and heard when actively participating. If for some reason that's not possible, bring it to my attention or to the Democratic Services Officer's attention as soon as you can. If we could please make sure all debate is conducted verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording, and just use that chat function to let us know if you have a technical issue or if you want to get my attention or the attention of the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should at least let me know or let the Democratic Services Officer know. So if I can just now welcome all committee members, all cabinet members, any other members of the public also who are tuning in to view this broadcast tonight. If we move on to part one, please, and apologies for absence. I have one apology from Councillor Hamilton. Do we have anybody else, please?
I've not had anything directly, Chair, but I can see that Councillor Carroll has his hand up.
Apologies if they have joined, Chair, because I can't see on the list, but both Councillors Wood and Fisher are travelling home from work, so they will be joining, but maybe late.
Thank you.
Councillor Wood is on, just to let you know, Councillor Carroll, but we'll obviously take on board Councillor Fisher's apology. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Agenda item 2.
Sorry,
Councillor Fisher.
Hi, Councillor.
Lovely to see you. Evening. Okay, so we move on to minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of September 2024. Do I have, and hopefully they are a correct and complete record of that meeting? If so, can I ask for a hand to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Drake. Perfect. Agenda item 3 then, this is to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interest. Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would like to declare a personal interest under items 7 and 8 regarding reshaping as a Barry Town Council member. I do have dispensation from the Standards Committee to both speak and vote under these items.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drake. Or Councillor Johnson? I don't mind who goes first.
Thank you, Chair. As a member of Barry Town Council, I also have dispensation from the Standards Committee to speak and vote on matters relating to reshaping services in those items. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Franks.
If you press your request to speak.
Sorry. Back online?
Yes, you're here. You're loud and clear.
I am a member of Dennis Parish Community Council, and we're involved with discussions relating to community transfer. I'm also a member of the Dinas Powys Library, as a trustee, and I'm sure somewhere in all these documents the library is mentioned. In both instances, I have dispensation to speak. And tell you the truth, probably the interest is so tiny I could vote as well, but I'll judge that during discussions.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Do we have any other declarations of interest then? Okay, brilliant. All right then. So we'll move swiftly on to our references. And before we start with agenda items 4 and 5, I just want to mention a report that we received last week from the Wells Centre for the Public Policy. It's their response to the Vale of Glamorgan's carbon management plan. It's a good report. There are 44 points in it for consideration. So I have been asked by officers to defer these two reports to give them an opportunity to properly consider them against both of those reports. And I'm asking committee if they also accept that that would probably be beneficial to help us to have a robust and complete debate, to defer those reports until the next meeting so that officers can take time to absorb all of those recommendations and possibly amend reports if they see the need to. So if I can have committees backing to do that, then that's certainly something that I think would be beneficial. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you, Councillor Drake. Marvellous. And when we do then debate next November those two reports, I also see no reason why we shouldn't also see the recommendations that have come from the WCCP report too, because it makes sense for us to. If we move then on to agenda item 6, which is another reference that's come from Cabinet on the 10th of October. And this is the draft Vale of Glamorgan Council Corporate Plan 2025 to 2030. And I think we have Tom with us. We do. Great. Tom, if you'd like to take us through this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee. Thank you for deferring those previous two reports. That is appreciated to give us a little bit of time. I think colleagues have got a presentation that they're going to show now. Excellent. So thank you for taking this reference of the draft corporate plan for 2025-2030. I'm joined on the call this evening by my colleague Helen Moses, who's the Operational Manager for Corporate Strategy and Insight, and we'll just give you a brief overview of the draft plan, which is being brought to your committee alongside all of the other scrutiny committees and a range of others this month for consultation. So if we can move to the next slide, please. This shows you the background and the purpose really of the corporate plan and what it needs to achieve for us. It needs to articulate how we're going to go about delivering our duties under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which I know members are very familiar with now. It sets out 5 new wellbeing objectives that I'll describe in a moment. It shows, importantly, I think, about how we're responding to the findings of the Let's Talk Residents Survey and also a range of other consultation exercises that have been run, and provides us with the strategic framework now for our planning at a corporate level over the next 5 years, setting out how we'll change, improve and deliver on services. It articulates what residents and partners can expect of the organisation, as well as detailing some of the key challenges that local authority is facing at the current time. It highlights some cross-cutting themes within the plan, which collectively the actions within the plan itself will seek to deliver against. This corporate plan has a range of different or new aspects to it, one of which is a statement about working together with other organisations, and I'll give you an overview of that momentarily. And also, you've got a reference this evening, members, on your agenda relating to strengthening communities, and part of that piece of work is looking at how we bring together our collective actions relating to tackling poverty. So there is a dedicated section within the plan that does that. And this is the Council's most important strategic document. It's what we will be judged against in terms of our commitments, as well as obviously providing the vehicle for scrutiny in the coming years. The next slide sets out an overview of the structure of the plan. Provides a forward from the leader of the council and the chief executive. It then gives a section around the facts and figures, achievements of the current corporate plan, as well as some important information relating to the council's financial context. There's a section within the plan called A Plan for the Future. This details a range of different activities that have come together and will shape the future of the local authority, talking about how we've listened to the findings of Let's Talk, the key challenges of inequalities, tackling poverty, climate and the nature emergency, and also then making a link to your later agenda item this evening on reshaping, alongside some of the other key pieces of work that we're looking to take forward in the coming years around placemaking, and also commitments to engaging with a variety of people and working in partnership. As I say, it then comes on to cover the statement around working with others, our commitments to other organisations, and then details the 5 wellbeing objectives with 50 actions across the plan. It sets out a range of outcomes that we want to achieve in terms of delivering those actions, and members will note within this corporate plan that those outcomes are describing, if you like, the population level outcomes that we want to see. So in some instances, things that the council is not entirely in sole control or influence over, but really articulates, we think, the outcomes that we want to see by progressing this plan. There's then the section on poverty, bringing together actions from across the plan into one particular section, and then some information around how the plan will be monitored and evaluated. Taking on board the feedback from elected members in a range of forums, we've made sure that there's a detailed glossary within this version of the corporate plan to explain any particular technical terms as well. The next slide that you've got in the pack this evening, and we'll make sure that these slides are circulated to elected members after the meeting as well. This shows you the 5 draft wellbeing objectives that have been developed, and these have been developed following a process of involvement and engagement with a really wide range of people, and come from the perspective of thinking about what does strong communities with a bright future mean, and we're trying to articulate this here from 2 perspectives, one in terms of place, and then the second in terms of people. So the objectives themselves are about creating great places to live, work and visit. This brings into play the aspects of our work around placemaking, planning, the economy, tourism, housing, as well as leisure, jobs, civic pride, age-friendly, community, business, social enterprise and the third sector. The second of the wellbeing objectives is around respecting and celebrating the environment. So this section contains our commitments around tackling climate change, the net zero ambitions, as well as our commitment to arresting the nature emergency, as well as actions around green space, active travel, transportation, energy, as well as waste, coast, flooding and pollution. The next 2 of the objectives are around people, and this is again a bit of a departure from previous versions of the corporate plan, where we're looking at the work being very much focused on particular parts of our population. So the first is around giving everyone a good start in life. This brings into play all of the work that happens within our schools, as well as our commitments around tackling child poverty, sports and play, a focus around youth engagement, those early year health issues, preventative services, wellbeing, and supporting families. And then supporting and protecting those who need us is the objective that brings in the aspects of work where we're looking at children looked after, the support that the council provides to carers, our work around tackling homelessness as well as adult care, social housing commitments and support, as well as information and advice services, progressing the work around county sanctuary, and also working with the health and third sectors. And then finally, the fifth of the draft wellbeing objectives is about being the best council that we can be. So this has a more inward-looking focus, perhaps, than the first four wellbeing objectives. But this looks at the aspects of our work around supporting and developing our workforce, the work that is underway in terms of financial sustainability, as well as considering our other resources such as assets, digital, our procurement activities, progressing the commitments that the council has set out in terms of public participation, obviously Welsh language, as well as social value, and linking the corporate plan with the reshaping programme in terms of transformation. And as part of all of those 5 wellbeing objectives, there's a commitment around tackling poverty and inequality throughout the plan. The next slide that you've got in the pack this evening, members, shows our commitment to those working with us. And this is just a summary of the section within the corporate plan. And it's been structured around the council's 4 values of being open, ambitious, working together, and proud. And this is intended to set out a very clear and simple statement of what organisations such as the third sector, community groups, town and community councils, social enterprise, public bodies and businesses can expect when interacting with the council. So they can expect for us to be open and honest, giving those organisations chances to be involved in decisions and making sure that their voices are heard, to make sure that there's sufficient time and different ways to share feedback on council plans, and indeed we're doing that as part of the consultation on this plan that Helen will describe in a moment. We will clearly explain what is and isn't possible and why, and then provide clear and simple information about grants and other opportunities with fair expectations and timelines for consideration. We'll seek to work with various organisations to solve problems and to find opportunities, and to listen to others' ideas with easy ways to get in touch with us, supporting communities in managing local services. And finally, this is all being done in conjunction with respecting our diverse communities, aiming for fairness and celebrating Welsh culture. So I'm going to hand over, members, to my colleague Helen now, who's going to take you through some just examples that are particularly pertinent to the remit of your committee.
Thank you, Tom. So as Tom has mentioned, this report has been referred to all scrutiny committees. So as we're presenting the report to the different committees, we're taking the opportunity to pull out some of the example actions from the draft corporate plan that are particularly pertinent to the committee. There's 50 actions in total across the draft plan, across those 5 different objectives that Tom has just described. And the examples we've pulled out here cut across a number of different objectives. So, for example, the first one we've pulled out here under Objective 1 in terms of that creating a great place to live, work and visit is that emphasis on working with the voluntary and social enterprise sectors and recognising that they have a role in terms of delivering services and supporting residents. So again, linking it to some of the work that we're doing around transformation and tackling poverty, emphasising that need to be working very actively in partnership with others. Under Objective 2, respecting and celebrating the environment, the example action we pulled out here is about delivering the Project Zero programme, which we regularly report to this committee about. So you can see here that we're highlighting that importance of reducing our own emissions, but also taking action as part of work across Wales and the target for 2050. So we've pulled out those couple of examples there. Then in terms of Objective 5, which is the being the best council we can be objective, and this is really the objective where it brings together a number of different activities across the council that, in terms of pulling those all together and getting those right, will enable us to deliver the other objectives within the plan. So we're emphasising here the importance of improving how those services are provided to ensure that people can access those services in a way that best meets their needs. So again, recognising the need to adapt to different approaches to meet different needs of our communities. Transforming our services, so again, we're focusing on the needs of the community, but think about those different delivery models and resources, but also being aware of our financial constraints. So again, this very much reflects the ambitions around reshaping. Also, as part of reshaping, digital is one of the key themes here. So we've identified that as one of the commitments in the draft plan about using technology to see how we can improve services for residents and colleagues, but still ensuring that we can be responsive and accessible for our residents and other stakeholders. We've recognised the importance of engagement, so that is a clear thread throughout the plan, but we've particularly included the action here around those providing more meaningful opportunities to engage and consult with our residents so they can shape decisions and how the council works. And again, this particularly reflects some of the feedback that we were aware of through Let's Talk, which is why we've made it a very prominent element of the draft corporate plan. Again, picking up on some of the reshaping themes, we've got commitments around using our buildings and sites and being more innovative, and then also actions around putting social value and decarbonisation at the heart of how we buy and commission goods and services. So again, that links back to some of the commitments around Project Zero as well, but about being the best council that we can be. We're also aware that some of the feedback through Let's Talk was around sort of the accountability and the value for money from the council. So we've got an action in here about our accountability and transparency and sharing more information about the role of the council, because this was something that came through in Let's Talk in terms of maybe a lack of awareness of some people about all the different aspects of council activity. And then we've also included an action around investing our colleagues, both current and recognising the need to think about the future and the skills, retention, engagement. So again, very much linking to the commitments within our people strategy. So that's just an example of some of the actions that we particularly wanted to bring to the committee's attention to give a flavour of what's in the draft plan. If I can move on to the next slide, please. What we've done here is we've pulled out some of the example actions that highlight the commitments within the draft plan around tackling poverty. As we developed each of the activities through the 5 wellbeing objectives, we focused on how activities under them would contribute to work to tackle and prevent poverty. So within the plan, you'll see these actions listed within its individual objective, but we've also pulled it through into a separate section so it can be seen all together. So the numbers in brackets here against these activities are just a reference to which objective they sit through. So you can see here that they are prominent throughout the plan itself. And you'll see that we've got actions here around sort of integrating the work that we do, so make sure we're joining it up more clearly, focusing on families and children living in poverty, making sure that we've got services around preventing homelessness and housing options, and also how we can increase the supply of quality and affordable housing. We recognise that transport can be a key issue for those people who might be struggling more financially. So again, we've pulled through the action that's under Objective 2 around promoting the need for quality and timely local public transport services. And again, thinking about some of those ways that people might be excluded in terms of access to leisure activities. There's an action under Objective 1 about making sure that we have affordable and accessible ways for people to participate in those activities as well. And then a specific one around young people. We've got an action then around the links that we would make in terms of employment. So again, recognising the importance of people being able to access decent employment, and also the action around the food strategy as well. So you can see that across the range of work that we've got here for tackling poverty, we cover a number of different themes, and they are set out within the draft plan itself. If I can move on to the next slide then, please. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of the content in terms of those commitments. We're also, as part of the development of the plan itself and the work that supports it, considering how we can sort of take stock of some of the other activities that support that. So again, very closely linking with the annual budget process to help shape the corporate plan. And as we move into the final stages, looking at the budget and then the responses to consultation. We're also considering how we might be able to rationalise some of the annual plans that support the corporate plan itself. So thinking about potentially how we might move away from the 15 service plans to looking maybe more at directorate plans. So that's one of the things that we're considering at the moment, and thinking that that will link us much more closely to the annual self-assessment process as well. You'll see within the draft plan that we've highlighted the importance of developing key measures for each of the objectives. So that's work that we're starting to take forward now in line with the consultation itself. And within that as well, we're aware of the feedback that we've had around the performance report, so how we can make them more timely and more streamlined, because there's a lot of information within the current report. So we're thinking about that as part of the work that we take forward. And we're also aware from the feedback of this committee and also Audit Wales of strengthening how we focus on outcomes, which is why we we've made sure that we've included our ambitions and outcomes within the draft plan itself. And to complement some of that, we're considering how we might be able to build on some of those more themed reports that we currently develop around some of those priority areas in the annual delivery plan. So, for example, the ones around Project Zero or the cost of living. So just to sort of reflect that we are looking at some of these aspects as well as part of that whole package of work associated with the corporate plan. And the next slide then, please. So just to highlight the timetable that we have at the moment, the consultation launched last week and will close on the 8th of December, so it'll be 8 weeks in total. We'll then be working to go through all that consultation feedback, working with colleagues across the council to see how we make the changes necessary to the corporate plan in response to that feedback, and also information regarding the budget. We will then bring the revised plan back to this committee in February, and then on to Cabinet and Council in early March before we publish at the beginning of April. So that's the plan that we now have ahead of us. And then if I can just move on to the next slide, which details the consultation that we're undertaking at the moment. So as I mentioned, we've already launched the consultation. So on Participate Vale, there is the online survey. We've also got a plan on a page and an executive summary on that site as well. There are hard copies of the survey being made available in the libraries and at other venues. So when we're out at the public drop-in sessions, we're leaving surveys there for people to complete who may use that venue. There's 4 face-to-face public drop-in sessions across Barry, Penarth, Cowbridge and Llantwit Major. So colleagues who are in Barry today and Penarth last week, so we've already started on those, as well as stakeholder engagement events. So there's one tomorrow, and focusing some of the work around the relationship statement so we can discuss that in more detail with some of our partners, and also the commitments around tackling poverty as well. So we've got some focus sessions, particularly on those elements. We're working with the youth service to make sure that we can reach young people. So although we've taken on board the comments through the Make Your Mark survey, as we have done with Let's Talk, we also want to speak to young people as well about the corporate plan. And last week we were at the 50 Plus Forum AGM as well. So we were able to give out copies of the survey and speak to people about the corporate plan there. We're attending a number of different committee meetings. So we've already been to the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee and Community Liaison Committee, as well as the Scrutiny Committees. And then there's a number of other meetings that we're attending. So, for example, Head Teacher Steering Group, the Equality Consultative Forum, and meeting with the trade unions, as well as staff engagement. So we're trying to reach out to as many different people as possible and provide various means for people to actually respond to the consultation. And this, as I say, builds on the information we've taken from Make Your Mark and Let's Talk, as well as the engagement that we did over the summer with our draft objectives. And then I think the next slide then, I think so that just brings us to the end of the consultation. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Helen. Yes, understand that we are seeing this report tonight, as has been shared with the other scrutiny committees, as part of the consultation process for our consideration. I'm quite happy with the way that we are, the way we've designed this plan. I like the 5 wellbeing objectives. I think that works really well. The figures are quite stark, I have to be honest. And the gap in life expectancy between the most and the least deprived areas in our ward of 19.3 years for females and 17.9 years for men is staggering. It's not, and it's just not acceptable. So I completely understand why we are focusing on poverty and eradicating poverty, because it is at the root of all of the inequalities that our residents face, and so I applaud you for that. We've got a couple of people who have got hands up from the committee. So before I continue to take all of the time and the air, I'm going to hand you over to Councillor Franks, who I think has got the first questions. Thank you, Councillor Franks.
Thank you. That was an interesting presentation, and I might have missed it, but I didn't notice very much that relates directly to older people. There was at the 50 Plus Forum last week criticism about the absence of reference to older people, and that criticism wasn't really rebutted. I wonder if the allegations are justified, and what is the response of, I would imagine, Helen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we have not got a specific objective on older people as we have on giving children a good start in life. And I think the objective around giving everyone a good start in life very much recognises the significant sort of role of schools within council services and in some of the issues that we know some of our young people are facing. We have throughout the plan got a number of activities that will be consistent with the work that's happening to make the Vale an age friendly, and within objective 1, creating the Vale as a great place to live, work and visit, we have got a specific outcome there in terms of making the Vale more age friendly. So although it's not necessarily a specific action, it is one of the outcomes that we will be looking to deliver, and the range of actions that we've got within the corporate plan will all contribute to making the Vale age friendly. So whether that's the access to different social activities and leisure activities, the activities around public transport, and a number of the activities within Objective 4 around protecting and supporting those who might need extra assistance. We would recognise that many of those would be contributing to making services better for older people. I think similarly in terms of the reflecting some of the actions within our 5th objective around how people access services in different ways, and some of the work that would be taken forward through the strategic equality plan would also recognise the needs of older people. So I have taken on board from some of the comments that we did have at the 50 Plus Forum AGM, for example, last week, about it not being a specific objective in itself. But we do believe that the commitments across the 5 objectives will all very much align to the work that's happening around age friendly, which we have got as one of our ambitions within the plan.
Thank you, Helen. That was interesting, but I'm not sure if a general answer like that is going to satisfy many older people. We've heard from the chair just now about the grim statistics that principally relate to older people regarding life expectancy, and there was a feeling that older people in the Vale are a secondary consideration. This is not what I was saying, it's what members of the audience was saying. So I take it, though, from Helen's comments, the corporate plan won't be changed to reflect these concerns, or will it? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. To correct myself as well, and just to put the record straight, the gap in healthy life expectancy between the most deprived, and the least deprived parts of the ward are, as said, but that in itself is still absolutely horrendous. I think, as this report has highlighted, we are looking at designing our services around our residents, which is exactly how it should be. And as 22.3% of our residents are over 65, it goes without saying that there will be that focus on designing a service that is going to suit and to fit the needs of our residents. So I'm quite happy that this is going to be a focus because it is a quarter percentage of our residents. Councillor Goodjohn.
Sorry, Chair. I didn't know if the leader or officers wanted to come in as well on that point, but otherwise I'll ask my questions.
Leader, would you like to? Yeah. Thank you. Oh, Helen, would you like to come in? Or the leader? Who's first? Thank you. Can we have the leader first then? Because she would like to make a comment, and then I'll bring Helen back in. Thank you.
Sorry, leader. I think you're on mute. There's no audio coming through unless it's just me. I don't know.
While we wait for the leader then to try and come back to us, Helen, would you like to come back in? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I suppose probably maybe just to clarify my points earlier, I think what I was trying to say is that as part of the development of the corporate plan, we were very conscious that we were putting in that objective that was around giving young people a good start in life. And we were considering very much, obviously, commitments in terms of how they'd contribute towards people as they're growing older, living in the Vale. Definitely as part of the consultation in terms of we'll be looking at what the feedback is from people in terms of what they think of the objectives and the commitments within the plan. And that will then obviously lead to any future changes to the plan before it is finalised. So certainly we would be taking on board any comments that we will receive regarding how the plan reflects the needs of older people and whether that then requires us to change the draft plan. So just to sort of highlight that we are very much recognise we're in the consultation period.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Lovelock-Ed. No, I think the leader, if you don't mind waiting a little bit longer, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards, if the leader can speak, that would be wonderful.
Well, I think I just heard the tail end of Helen actually saying a similar thing. It's a consultation. Cabinet will listen to all contributions from all committees, and then we'll bring forward any amendments. It's why we attend. I can see that there's other Cabinet members on the meeting as well. We are listening intently to your comments. I think the only thing that I would say, as Councillor Prothero has said, one of those really stark pieces of information is that is the difference in healthy life expectancy. So actually, when we look at the objectives of the plan, then it rightly says that we are going to be focusing on those that need our support. So we, in that case, we would be focusing on supporting those people who have the lower healthy life expectancy. But it goes without saying that when we're supporting our population as a whole, then we would obviously be supporting older people. It's why we have our forum to be able to listen. It's why we are an age-friendly county. So if I can just put committees' minds at rest, that we are very much listening, and that yes, the needs of older people are very much in our minds. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Lovelock-Edwards, would you like to ask your question? Thank you.
It's a comment as well as a question, Chair, and that's because I was also, as Councillor Franksnow, at the AGM last week, and as the champion for older people, I'm more than aware of how our community of older residents feel at various times. And yes, there was, it's fair to say, sort of a criticism of debate, but I am confident that the survey results last year showed us or set us on the right path for ensuring that community engagement across the spectrum, across the board, is going to be key to sort of this consultation process. And I've already taken it upon myself to sort of follow in from the AGM to go back and ask officers to double their efforts in terms of how they engage with certain groups across communities, underrepresented groups, and that includes older and more vulnerable adults. And I know that every effort is going to be made, and the key point that I keep driving across is that this document is for us all, is incumbent on us all as councillors as well, to take it out there to our communities and to share amongst all those informal networks that perhaps officers may not be aware of local groups that are self-organised, self-managed, that come together, that have those discussions. And as councillors, we know the natural leaders, we know where they congregate, and I just, when you put out any type of document for consultation, then you are limited to how wide and deep you can spread the message to get people to engage. And I take on board what Councillor Francis said, is that was the feeling amongst participants of the AGM. But I just want to, I suppose, give him assurances that that the AGM executive, the 50 plus forum executive team, we're also mindful of work that they need to do to sort of engage and ensure that the members of their forum participate. And that's all I wanted to say on that. And I'm mindful of the language of the consultation plan. I'm mindful that sort of to some individuals, they feel that they're not, they don't factor in that consultation plan. But once you dig down, and perhaps that's where we come back to sort of the use of tone and language and jargon, I think people will see that the officers and the consultation plan, the draft plan itself, it is taken into consideration residents' wants and needs across the spectrum of our community, and not just focusing on one group. However, I have asked for perhaps some intergenerational consultation to take place, so we can bring together different groups and different age groups in particular, so that dialogue and discussion can take place. So, there's a better understanding from all groups about the wants and needs of residents. Because sometimes we all get sort of sucked into an echo chamber. And I'm sorry, not so much as a question, but more a commentary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. And you're absolutely right. We have got 8 weeks to get this report in front of as many people as we possibly can and collect those voices and their opinions, and help people to see that this council listens and also acts. So yes, I agree with you. It is down to us as members as well to make sure that everybody gets this. Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may, I'll make a few comments, and then I have 2 questions mainly. Firstly, I think it's extremely good to see the 5th objective on being the best council that we can be. I don't think we would have, well, it wasn't in the last corporate plan. I don't think I would have seen it here 2 years ago. I'm not even sure if I would have seen it here last year, because there has been a rapid change within the organisation of how we view transparency and openness, and trying to be held accountable, as it is important for the public as it is for us to make sure we are as efficient as possible in of ourselves, to make sure that we're making the right decisions and that we're open to change. So I'm pleased to see that. But it's going to take a long time to rebuild trust in communities, not just obviously because of us, but obviously because of government at all levels, and the lack of trust currently in politicians and in public life. also, I am definitely pleased to see continuing the commitment towards the environment, respecting it, and more than anything, protecting it. I think this is key throughout the document. And also on poverty, which I'm also not sure I would have seen a few years ago, is the focus on poverty within the document is extremely important. But there is a huge way to go to embedding it within the organization. And this is an enormous task to put on ourselves, but we must act as quickly as possible. My questions are, firstly, as a corporate plan, it integrates a lot of things that we've already said. So we've already talked about, say, a replacement local development plan, age-friendly, trying to be as open as possible. In fact, actually, the values that are put within the document are already here on our lanyards that we got years back: open, together, proud, ambitious. I wonder what the thought process is. What should people see that is different this time round in these next 5 years from 25-30 compared to 20 to 25? What should people be able to actively see the council doing differently? To summarize, and in the plainest possible terms, what is different this time about this corporate plan, and how will the council act differently that people can actively see in their day-to-day lives? That's my first question. I'll have a second after.
Thank you, Councillor Good John. So who's going to answer that? Tom? Helen? Tom, marvellous. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the comments and the question as well, Councillor Good John. I think the observations around some of the continuity is important. So the existing corporate plan has put us in a strong position. It's got us through a pandemic, cost of living crisis. So some of those aspects absolutely will remain in there, and the values are particularly important, I think, to continue. They're well understood by council colleagues, but there are a range of things that I think show an evolution within this corporate plan. Firstly, several members have made reference to the outcomes that we're looking to achieve. So I think in terms of for members of the public, our residents who may be watching or who are looking at the plan, there's a section within each of the wellbeing objectives that shows exactly what we are looking to achieve as part of this version of the corporate plan. You can also see some particular commitments within the plan, particularly around ways of working. So several members have commented on transparency, but also about listening in terms of our engagement and our involvement work. I think there's a maturity in this version of the plan in terms of how we're looking to work with partners. I think there's an acknowledgement in there throughout that we want to be working with different parts of our community, whether that's community groups, whether that's communities of practice or interest, whether that's other organisations. So I think there are clear commitments within that. And there's also clear commitments around some of the most important things that we can be doing in terms of our work around community-focused schools, social housing, the school building programme, those things that people will be able to see tangibly making a difference to their lives in the Vale in the next 5 years.
Thank you, Tom. My thought process is that's absolutely fantastic, and it's a fantastic aim to have everything that we have in this document. But there comes the inevitable question of how do we prove it, and how do we show it to people? I think we have had a key problem in the past with our performance. With the documents that we get in through committee, with the feedback that we get through this committee and all other scrutiny committees, we see a vastly different picture compared to what is experienced day to day and the feedback that I get from residents. So how are we going to change the way that we do performance monitoring, and how are we going to change the way that the culture is in the organization to be able to show with the little things before even the big things how we're changing as an organization and how this corporate plan reflects listening and being more open and being held better to account by the public and communicating better with the public than it has in the past. So how do we end the detachment as far as possible between the corporate level here and what people are seeing visibly on the ground?
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. In terms of the performance arrangements, the monitoring, the reporting around the corporate plan, Helen mentioned a little while ago in the presentation around some early work that we've done, and thank you to yourself and other colleagues from the vice chairs and chairs of scrutiny committees and group leaders who were able to join a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I know we'll be having more conversations with that group of members now in the coming months in terms of how we go about managing performance. And I think you're right. At the moment, we've got hundreds and hundreds of actions and measures within the framework that we present to scrutiny committees on a quarterly basis, and there is an opportunity now for us to look at the outcomes that the corporate plan is setting out in its draft form, and I think simplify how we go about doing that. And there might be some technical things that we can do around, directorate level plans rather than service plans, which I think would reduce the number of actions that you'd be seeing as elected members. But I think there is also an opportunity, and this reflects on feedback we've had from residents as well as elected members, to look at the way that we present that information, and also some of the things like indicators that we would use to show our progress. And I'm making those very closely aligned with some of the aspects of sentiment that you're referring to. We've also made the commitment that we will run Let's Talk About Life in the Vale as a survey exercise on a regular basis, and we're committed to sense checking and understanding the public appetite and perception of the council as well. In terms of the second aspect that you were referring to, in terms of almost translating this from the corporate level down to, but what happens to the 4,000 odd colleagues that are providing services on a regular basis, if you don't mind, I could probably cover some of that as part of the reshaping work that we're going to be discussing next on the agenda, and in particular the Brilliant Basics work stream that's there, and some of the organisational development activity that we do with middle managers at the moment.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Johnson, you've been waiting patiently. Please come in.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to agree to some extent with Councillor Goodjohn there, with the council experiencing success with the public in any part of the corporate plan. I also considered the developments over the years in the corporate plan. There were 4 objectives in the 2016 one, 2024 in the last one, and we've developed 5 this time. The consultation hopefully demonstrates, as Councillor Franks suggested earlier on, if we accept that those 5 points are the core points for the corporate plan, and how this weaves into cross-cutting points about tackling poverty. Amongst my issues with the document at the moment, and I accept that it is a consultation document, of course, is the fact that at the moment it doesn't have any measure to test success being developed in the process, which leaves us with a lot of words, warm and pleasant words. You can't disagree with the objectives in the document, nobody is going to argue for making things worse or the council not being transparent, but the reality is, how is this tested and demonstrated? And for me, this continues to be a miss from the previous plans. I'm finding that we're spending a lot of time looking at consultations, and as I've said, and as Tom has heard before, it's difficult to argue against the words that are there, but what we need is an evaluation of how successful something was and where we're learning the lessons. Consider this during the consultation to me whether it's something we've learned enough on. Another question for me is how we scrutinise this work as we progress, not during the consultation period, but as somebody who's been on the council for a long enough time. I remember in the 2016 period, I think, we changed the scrutiny committees around the 4 objectives with one overview, which was corporate resources, looking across things from a council perspective. So I was just considering whether, because the cross-cutting work is important, but how will we look to scrutinise this is something that will be interesting as we look towards performance in future. There are other things I'd like to comment on, but perhaps not right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Tom, reflections? Learning from the past to start with, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Johnson. And we are very mindful that those measures of success or measures of progress are really important parts of the corporate plan, absolutely, for all the reasons that you outlined. And there is work underway currently to look at what those measures could look like in terms of the final version of the corporate plan. So the work is very much in progress. It's based on the outcomes that we want to see section within each of the 5 wellbeing objectives. So whilst I know we've at the moment set out, that's in effect the global stuff, the stuff at a population level that we want to see the plan deliver, we now need to do the piece of work in the next few months in terms of translating that to, okay, but actually what has the council done and what impact is that having? So that work is underway and will accompany the final version of the plan. You're absolutely right in terms of your reflections on 2016, the first plan that we had under the Future Generations Act. It was 4 outcomes that we had in that plan, which had a couple of objectives per outcome, and that was really useful in helping to reshape the scrutiny committees as you were reflecting. I think there is an opportunity for us to look at the way in which the corporate plan is scrutinised, whether that's in its reporting, so the information we're providing to members, giving you both the statistical information that I know members find useful in terms of progress against actions and the measures, but also perhaps in the format that you receive that in terms of making sure that you're seeing some more of the kind of case study and impact, the kind of more qualitative side of things. The conversation that we've kicked off with some elected members has been around, okay, actually, there are lots of cross-cutting issues within this plan. This plan doesn't necessarily align as neatly with the existing scrutiny committees. So is it useful that we would look at a different way of scrutinising perhaps? So, could you collectively scrutinise the plan or would one committee take a lead on it? I think there's an appetite to look at how it influences the scrutiny work programmes more broadly as well. So instead of you having a quarterly report on all of the plan, how do we make it link with interim report. So Helen mentioned the Project Zero report that you received as a committee. We also produce a 6-monthly update around the work on poverty. So is that something that we could look to replicate for some of the other issues within the plan, to go to committee to complement the overall scrutiny arrangements? So certainly all of that is under discussion and consideration, and absolutely the work around those measures to accompany the final version is work in progress as well.
Thank you, Tom. And yes, I agree with Councillor Johnson. We have asked for them for the plan to be more outcome focused, and I am curious to see, when we have the final plan, how those high level measures are going to look and how we are going to manage and monitor the performance of the plan. And it is an interesting thought, as you rightly said, because are we going to just almost like tick off all of the actions in a very binary way? Are we going to look and see and measure success? Because that gap between the as we talked about in the beginning of this discussion, between the healthiest life expectancy from the worst, one side of the ward to the other, the least deprived to the most deprived, are we going to see that narrow? Are we going to consider that to be an outcome? Are we going to go to the perceptions of our residents and see if they feel that life in the Vale is improving, or just simply the wealth of the authority? There's so many different ways that you could measure it, and it's an interesting piece of work. The leader is back on, so can I just ask her to come in for comment? Thank you.
Let's see if it works. Is that working?
Yes, you're here.
Excellent.
Loud and clear.
One thing that struck me was when it was the question from Councillor Goodjohn in terms of, well, what will we see? This is a lot of this is the same. Well, we don't stop working on one plan on at the end of March next year and start on a new one and throw everything up in the air in that. So as Tom said, there are some things that will continue, but it was time to take a bit of a stock take and say, is the direction of travel the one that we would want to go in for the next 5 years? Because in effect, this takes us up to 2030. And one thing that I would draw committee's attention to is the discussion of partnerships and how we work in partnership. It can make things, I suppose, use the word advisedly, a bit messy. It's not straightforward. We have to work with other organisations and with them, through them, lobby, partnerships, etc., because we are not actually in control of a lot of things that really matter to the people of the Vale. But we can't ignore the fact that they are important to the people of the Vale. So we will work with health, we will work with transport, we will work with the voluntary and social enterprise sector in terms of bringing that forward. And if you have a look at page 21 of the draft plan, where it talks about our commitment to those working with us. I was in the One Voice Wales conference in Builth the other day, representing the Welsh Local Government Association, and signing a memorandum of understanding between the WLGA and One Voice Wales, which is the organisation that represents town and community councils. And I actually spoke to them a little bit about the fact that we've laid out our sort of what we see as our relationship agreement with our partners, and we are trying to be as clear as possible as to what people should be able to expect through working with us, because those relationships are hugely important. And I think that is going to be quite a change in terms of how the council works, because it's not going to be how do you deliver this, how do we deliver that. It's going to be how do we work together to meet the needs of the people in the Vale of Glamorgan, and that has got to be a very clear direction of the council going forward, and very, very much look forward to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Johnson, I know you said you had more than those questions. Did you want to come back on this particular item, or?
No, it's the
save it for the next one.
The things I'll raise on different issues around this place.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, do we have any other comments that committee members would like to make on this particular item? No? Okay, that's great. So if we move to recommendations, and they were simply that the comments from this committee were to be shared with the Director of Corporate Resources to inform any revisions of the plan prior to Cabinet receiving a final draft. So if I can ask Mark to just collate our comments, that would be wonderful, and ensure that they are passed on to the. Yes, Mark?
Yeah, no, just say we'll
fine?
do.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks ever so much. Okay, so if we are all content with that, can I have a hand to move to the next agenda item? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you. Okay then, so just because I think this is going to make it easier for debate, I think we'll move on to agenda item 8 first, not agenda item 7. This is the reference from Cabinet on the 10th about the reshaping programme update. I think it will flow easier if we, and better for debate if we do that. If that's okay with everybody, yeah? Tom, you're there?
Great stuff. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for following the corporate plan with this particular item. I guess the corporate plan is setting out the ambitions that the organisation has got for 2030. The reshaping programme is the transformation programme, and has been referred to your committee this evening to show some of the ways that, as an organisation, we're looking to change in order to be able to deliver on those ambitions. The report that you've got before you this evening has got lots of contextual information, but just to give you a little bit of background. Reshaping Services as a programme was launched in 2015. At that time, it was the strategy to reshape the council to enable it to meet future needs of citizens of the Vale within the context of unprecedented financial challenges. The report sets out the progress that was made over 5 or so years under reshaping, where significant savings of over 59 million were made between 2010 and 2021. And the programme at that time helped us to mitigate the impacts of austerity by making changes to a whole raft of services, such as neighbourhood services, community-run libraries, the establishment of Big Fresh catering, as well as lots of internal work that was done in terms of introducing the council's new values and our engagement activity. In 2021, the council approved a report on renewing reshaping. That reflected the experiences that we'd had throughout the coronavirus pandemic and linked with the recovery strategy. And the financial pressures at that time on local government were not as acute as they are now, and enabled us to have more of an external focus to the reshaping programme. So that helped guide some of the work around that we've done in terms of our community outreach. The report makes reference to things like Warm Welcome, the work around food insecurity, Taking Back Penarth Peer Pavilion, for example. And then back in January of this year, Cabinet approved proposals for the development of the next stage of the reshaping programme. And indeed, we brought it to your committee, Chair, for discussion at the turn of this year. And the programme now is being presented again against the backdrop of a significant financial challenge. That's described in the medium-term financial strategy, and that'll be coming to committee next month in terms of the latest projections. But at this point, we're presenting the report, and Cabinet approved this on the 10th, in order to allow us to develop a programme of reshaping, and that's outlined within the prospectus, which is at Appendix A to your report this evening. And this is because delivering public services at a time of increasing demand and diminishing resources means that we do genuinely need to look at doing things in a fundamentally different and transformative way. That's the only way that we're going to be able to deliver against those commitments within the corporate plan. And it's going to involve every colleague and department of the organisation working on this strategy. And that also importantly includes our colleagues within schools. The report sets out some information in terms of how we've gone about developing the prospectus. It's been a really involving and engaging process. So I referenced coming to your committee earlier on in the year. We've also discussed with Community Liaison Committee, the Joint Consultative Forum, Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee, the Public Services Board, and taken into consideration the important views of our residents via the Let's Talk About Life in the Vale survey, and done lots of internal engagement work. And that's led us to the prospectus as you've got presented this evening, setting out in section 1 in terms of the vision, how it links with strong communities with a bright future, and then in section 2, how it links with the delivery of the council's overall strategy in the corporate plan. There's a section within the prospectus, and this reflects on the feedback from elected members of this committee when we were here earlier on in the year, that's described as the strategic outcomes framework. And the question that I was asked back in the spring was, when are we going to see some numbers? How are we going to know the kind of scale or the impact of changes? And it's really in this section that the members get a flavour of that, where we're setting out for a reshaping project to be within the portfolio of this particular work. It does need to be delivering a minimum of 10% savings on the budget, or 10% in terms of the cost avoidance in the future, and or contributing to the development of services. And the reason for the third category is because some of the work that will be done, in particular by my colleagues in HR and OD, will be about changing culture and some of the process work. And that doesn't have a direct financial benefit, but supports us in order to be able to deliver projects that absolutely do. And alongside that work, there's a link to the Future Generations Act, where those 5 ways of working will need to be demonstrated to show how projects are consistent with our work towards the Sustainable Development Principle. The 5th section within the prospectus sets out the 5 themes of the transformation strategy, and then there's some information in terms of the delivery. And the delivery shows you a couple of things, some initial work stream ideas, but also how those projects will be prioritised. The 5 themes of transformation are built around, firstly, the target operating model. So that's the strategic level of the organisation in terms of our processes, our people, our structure, governance, technology. In effect, I guess the strategic leadership team's work programme in terms of all of the enabling work that needs to be in place to make sure that the council is in a very strong position, or as strong a position as possible. So that's about what we do and also how we go about doing it. The second theme is around service transformation. This is where members will see particular service-specific examples of transformation that's being planned to make those services more sustainable in the medium to longer term. The prospectus sets out some guidance that colleagues across the organisation are using in order to develop those projects. The third of the themes is around strengthening communities. This is setting out how the council will in the future be an enabler and facilitator rather than a direct provider of some services. And this links intrinsically with that statement within the corporate plan that the leader was just making reference to. And that's particularly important as the financial position of the organisation means that in the future, the council may simply not be in a position to be delivering directly some services. And actually, we've seen in the past where actually appropriately some organisations are better placed to respond to those services, and community libraries is given it as an example within the report. Members of this committee saw the draft digital strategy, and thank you again to members for your comments as part of that. Digital innovation is the fourth theme of reshaping. That's going to be looking at how we can be more efficient in terms of our use of digital technology, and pursuing the four themes of the digital strategy that members have seen. And then fifthly, of the five themes is around economic resilience. That's bringing into play all of the work that the Council does in terms of supporting economic resilience and ensuring that that place-based approach that's within the corporate plan is effective in the creation of sustainable communities with really good employment, and the effects that that has on preventing and tackling poverty that councillors have just been discussing in the corporate plan. The projects that are looking to be pursued within the reshaping programme are contained within the prospectus. Members will note that some of those are already within the existing budget proposals. We were very keen, as the leader was just describing, that there is a transition between what we've currently got going on and the work that we're going to do. But there's also a need for us to prioritise some particular aspects of the programme going forward. And in paragraph 229, there are a series of 10 priorities, and these are the key pieces of work that we'll be looking to take forward now over the next year or so. And they relate to, and in response to Councillor Goodjohn's question, initially the Brilliant Basics piece of work, that's about improving resident or customer service, making sure that every interaction is a valuable one with the organisation, and getting the basics right as a foundation. The second is around key assets, and then also looking at income generation opportunities. We're listing neighbourhood services standards and approaches as our fourth key priority, and then a couple within schools. So looking at school budget management, being aware of the current financial context the schools are working in, progressing some work around agency staff that are used within schools, and how potentially there are maybe other opportunities or other options about how that is provided. A focus on additional learning needs, public transport and school transport. Importantly, looking at social care demand. We know that there's an increasing demand for both adult and child services, and also then homelessness. And that list of priorities has been developed by Cabinet and the strategic leadership team by considering what are the greatest risks to the organisation and therefore to our residents, both financially but also in non-financial terms, in order to come up with some of the priorities. And whilst the work on the priorities will progress, you will also see proposals coming through from other parts of the organisation as part of the budget proposals in the coming weeks and months. There's a section around governance within the report. Just wanted to draw attention for members of this committee that paragraph 232 sets out the proposal that obviously individual projects would be scrutinised by the relevant scrutiny committee, but it's proposed and Cabinet have approved that your committee chair would have oversight in terms of the overall programme, and that's the reason that they've referred this report to you this evening. So the next steps are that the budget working groups have commenced this month with all of the directorates to kick off the budget setting process. Throughout the second part of that process, which happens in November, there's an expectation that directors will be presenting their proposals around reshaping and around tactical savings. And as part of the overall budget proposals, they will then be coming to elected members through the budget setting process for consideration. Whilst that work is underway, we're doing a huge amount of work within the organisation to ensure that we are ready to deliver on the corporate plan and on the reshaping agenda. We've been running the management development sessions where we invite anybody with line management responsibility to come to a session, for example, and those sessions have been really productive. The one that I was facilitating with the Director of Learning and Skills this afternoon was a really encouraging one where people had good ideas, and we're enthused to go back into their teams to make some of this change happen. And that's going to be really key for us is in order to deliver on this wide-ranging agenda. So that's a really brief overview, and obviously happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Tom, for that. And yes, I actually completely agree with you when you talk about the brilliant basic stuff. The council can be doing amazing work, keeping people safe, educating people, looking after our old people. But if a perception of the measure is simply somebody waited too long to speak to someone at customer service, or there's a pothole outside the house and they don't really understand how the repairs are made. These are the things. And if we get the basics right, I think that will go a long way. Councillor Franks, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to focus on one small part, if I may, community action asset transfer. And I think really this is a question for a cabinet member. I want to say from the start that I'm a supporter of this strategy. However, I am concerned about the process. There's currently very little community involvement, either with residents, town community councils, or indeed county councillors. It can be a tremendous struggle to find out what is or is not being proposed, and there's a serious lack of financial details. How can we ensure that the interests of the public are being protected? We've got to be very mindful that the assets that we're considering are public assets and very valuable assets, both financially and in terms of public interest. So I would say there's a lack of transparency, engagement, and clarity, and I think when this process was starting, I did express concerns that we were expecting the officers to do too much and they weren't being resourced adequately, but I was assured that is not a problem. So I want to stress I support the community asset transfer, but I'm looking for my fears to be addressed at cabinet level. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. The leader has put her hand up, so I'm going to bring her in because I think she might be able to allay some of your fears on this matter. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Franks. I think community asset transfer is one of those tricky areas, isn't it? And funny enough, it was part of the conversations I had with people up at Bills last week. Taking on a public asset can be hugely onerous for some, community organisations, etc. And actually finding out whether or not that transfer has a chance of being sustainable needs a lot of skilled input. I think that it will be more effective when we have this relationship agreement where we can have open and honest conversations about what's involved in both. Because sometimes when we're looking at community asset transfers, it can be because the council can't afford to manage a venue that is not a priority. Well, in that case, you would have to make sure that it was viable. I actually think that maybe it's time to have a review of the community asset transfer process, but I would be interested to hear more specific examples of Councillor Franks' concerns so that we can work on them. So I'm quite happy to arrange a meeting with Councillor Franks and officers to explore that further.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Let's hope we can indeed meet up to discuss such things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franks, and thank you, Leader. I think at this meeting, probably 6 months, maybe 8 months ago, we were talking about asset transfers and the complexity for community groups and the fear for community groups when they're taking these on, that they will be able to manage and commercially make it support itself. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that a recommendation was that there was more support for them and a guide to being able to run a community building in a commercial way. So I think, as the Leader has said, definitely room to discuss the process. So that's really good. Do we have any other questions, please, on this particular agenda item? Councillor Johnson, please come in.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Tom.
Thank you very much, Tom, for the presentation. It's interesting for me again to hear about the reshaping of services of the council. If I remember correctly, it's some 11 years since the first time for me to hear that term in the context of changing how we deliver services to the public. The document itself is fairly comprehensive in the sense of how it almost covers all of the services that we deliver. So there's a question for me in terms of the timescales to implement this, in terms of how we prioritise the changes that the council intends to make. The governance side is interesting, and the decision-making process is also interesting. Just one further question in terms of the whole process, which is something that Councillor Hooper raised as well, which is the need or the interest in some sort of zero budgeting process where we go back to the start of the services that we deliver and we review which services are necessary because of statutory reasons and those which are optional in terms of what we need. It strikes me as some sort of zero budgeting process being an integral part of a reshaping that you suggest here, because if you look across all areas in the council, in terms of savings, or if we look at how we can deliver services better for the public, being preventative as an objective or being better overall, is a zero budgeting process helping us to shape all council processes? I would appreciate a response from Tom on that point, and also on the timescales and prioritisation, because if we look across the council and all of the services we deliver, these are a lot of things to take into consideration, and perhaps it's somewhat strange to think that we haven't gone when this process has been postponed so much before getting to this point and talking about reshaping the services of council for so long now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And in terms of the question around timescales and prioritisation, absolutely, we were really conscious when we were putting the prospectus together that, as you say, it covers, if you look at the kind of initial projects list within each of those sections, there's a huge range of work that has been identified. And the reason then for Cabinet asking for those 10 priorities to be linked with the areas of greatest risk is actually directly in response to where do you start? Because this is clearly about changing the way a whole organisation works over a period of a number of years. And the idea of starting with the greatest areas of risk, whether that's financial risk or indeed risk in terms of increasing demand, complexity, those kind of things, is what is behind that list of priorities. And we have been mindful to try and distribute that across the organisation as well, because we know that there are some capacity considerations or the capacity issues within teams. So it's really about looking at where do we need to start first and making sure that we're spreading that out across the organisation. I think your second point in terms of zero-based budgeting is, almost going back to the starting point and looking at what finance is available and then what's the best way to spend that. There are probably, in my mind, probably two aspects to that. One is that, yes, that I think that's a really sensible strategy. It's certainly something that we're doing within corporate resources at the moment, looking at actually how much money have we got available and how can we then go about spending it most efficiently. We've made some changes to the preparatory work that we're expecting the directorate management teams to do ahead of their budget working groups this year. One of those is picking up on the point from Councillor Hooper and yourself in terms of looking at the statutory and discretionary elements of services and having a more forensic look at how individual directorate budgets are spent at operational manager and head of service level. So we're starting to try and have that conversation in order to, in effect, take the lid off those budgets and really examine underneath what is being spent and how. So that's informing that work, and that's directly as a result of the feedback from yourself and other elected members. The second bit, I suppose, of that zero-base approach that slightly complicates it is where there are such tight or statutory duties that give us, in effect, some constraints around that funding. So I suppose the sweet spot for us is being able to identify the budgets that we can do that more forensic zero-base on, focusing in on those, and then really testing where there are constraints on the finance that's available in certain areas. And I'm thinking about things that we're provided grants or specific hypothecated funding towards. But absolutely, to give you some assurance that feedback has been taken on board and it is now being a more intrinsic part of the budget setting process this year.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Goodjohn, please. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hopefully that's working now. I wanted to focus on brilliant basics. Perhaps back to basics had some negative connotations to it. It's an interesting way of focusing on well, I've always been uncomfortable calling it customer, but what you're calling customer service, focusing on residents and putting delivery as the heart of what we're doing in every part of the organisation. I'm interested as to why the first thought process was to do a task and finish group. I think, and who that's being led by, is that being led by SLT, would be quite interesting. The other thing, some more information around that would be quite interesting in the process of how that's being taken forward. The other thing I'd be quite interested in is some of the service level transformations and how that's been decided. There are some guidelines within the document that we have here as to the kind of questions that you're asking when deciding what to prioritize. But if I take a look at something like schools and learning and skills, it looks like almost a list of everything that we do. And while I understand that there is a level to which we need to change the way that we work in statutory services, I'm quite interested as to see why the thought process has come about that is the best way to go about it, and if focusing on these statutory services will provide much fruition, considering it's an enormous amount of our budget. We haven't been able to find transformation in the past in them anywhere near as much as we've been able to with discretionary services. So I'm quite interested as to the thought process behind it and the way it's going to be taken forward in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. If I may take those in reverse order, perhaps. You're absolutely right in terms of the inclusion of lots of statutory services within the prospectus. I think that probably indicates the fact that we are now at a stage of pressure on the council budget that it's not possible to say these are big bits of council spend on education and on social care, so we'll have a strategy that focuses in on reshaping or transforming other aspects of the work. Back in the early part of the 2010s, a number of local authorities published what they were referring to as graphs of doom, where they were showing the expenditure on statutory services in education and social care increasing over time whilst funding was coming down, and were predicting that in effect, over time, the funding for everything else would be squeezed out by those two areas of expenditure. And then, indeed, in future years, there wouldn't be sufficient funding in order to cover those elements of the council's budget. And whilst I'm not suggesting that we're at that stage, I am suggesting that we've got exponential increases in expenditure within some parts of the organisation which are statutory functions, and we therefore do need to look at things like the levels of demand and what we can be doing in terms of social care, and also within schools, how we're spending the money within that part of the budget. And it'll be really good tomorrow, along with the Chief Exec, I'm meeting with all the head teachers to talk to them about the reshaping programme and to further get their input into that. So I think it is reflective of the times that we're in, and that's not to say that we don't continue with some of the non-social care and education-based transformation. That's really, really important. Certainly within my directorate, which is largely an enabling one, we know that in order to protect the funding going into those areas of the budget, we need to change how we work and to reduce costs in terms of how we do it. So that's kind of the background to why it's such a wide-ranging programme at this point. In terms of the service level transformation projects themselves, again, back in the very early part of reshaping, we looked at every single service quite forensically from both a financial and non-financial perspective. The guidance which is set out within the prospectus gives directors and their management teams some prompts of the things that they should be looking at, whether there are alternative delivery models, whether there are options on how we can work with others to deliver things, and also that distinction between statutory and non-statutory, albeit it's really difficult in lots of our services to make that very clear distinction. And also we're very mindful of not taking action now that reduces some of those preventative services that will in effect just store up problems for people in the future. So that's the kind of overview of the first question. And then that second question around brilliant basics, deliberately not called back to basics. We struggle with the term, whether is it customer, is it resident, is it service user. So those are used interchangeably. In terms of the approach to developing the initial kind of scope and guidance, that was a task and finish group that came together from across the organisation. So we had staff at all levels of the council and from all 5 of the directorates. They looked at some of the principles that could go into reducing bureaucracy, unnecessary bureaucracy, streamlining processes, what makes good customer contact, what makes good resident interaction, and indeed, how should we be interacting with one another internally as colleagues. The basis that gave us is now being further developed through the management development sessions. So where we're talking to 400 or so of our team leaders, asking them to translate what does that mean to them individually within their teams. And there's an expectation now that they take some of that work back to their teams. We'll also then be pulling that all together in order that we send out some guidance to all of our staff. And then, as well as that, this links to some of the work elsewhere within the operating model aspect of reshaping, where we're going to be looking at the top 20 resident journeys through our services to streamline those as far as possible, and also some of the work in terms of customer service. So hopefully that gives you just a little bit more background to Brilliant Basics.
Thanks, Tom. If it's all right to come back on that, that's for me the most interesting part, the Brilliant Basics stuff. So you're talking about the task and finish group has already been formed. There's a lot of work that's already gone into this. My immediate thought process is, what is the accountability model here? How are we expecting team leaders to deliver on that guidance, and who is holding them accountable, and also supporting them at the same time? I don't know whether that's you or that's through cabinet members, but I'm just quite fascinated as to this is very much a kind of behind the scenes change. I have, to be honest, haven't heard an enormous amount about this until today, and it's extremely interesting. I know it's been alluded to through reshaping discussions in the past, but how does this fit into the political sphere of the council, and how do we make sure that this ends up delivering not only on the big scale, but also on the smaller scales within different teams and parts of the organization? And how do we support those team leaders in making sure that what guidance they get in the end, they're able to deliver on and have the resources to deliver on?
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And absolutely, this is a piece of work that is going to be, that has really gathered some momentum in the last 6 or 8 weeks or so. So that's the reason why elected members may not be as familiar with it as yet. And as you say, Councillor, it's very much some of the behind the scenes work. We are really conscious of making sure that we are supporting our team leaders. It's the reason for delivering the management development programme in person, facilitated by members of SLT for the first time since before the pandemic, because I really do believe that we need to show them the leadership and give them the opportunity to come together and support one another in this work. So certainly that's how we're looking at supporting and developing them. Some of the work that I referenced in terms of the top 20 resident journeys, so in terms of how people are accessing our services and then the end outcome and satisfaction, there are some real demonstrable or measurable aspects to that work, and I would expect us to start to see that in the work that I was describing in response to Councillor Johnson on the previous item, in terms of some of those measures. Overall, in terms of the work around Brilliant Basics, this has got an eye on responding responding to some of those findings of Let's Talk, that resident survey as well. So making sure that that we've got an understanding of our colleagues in terms of how their interactions with our residents impacts on the overall perspective of the organisation. And some of those measures will be reported in further updates to your committee and cabinet in terms of the reshaping programme, but then also brought into the performance framework as well.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Leader has her hand up, so would you like to make comment on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I echo Councillor Goodjohn's comments that this is actually really exciting if we can get this right. Fairly regularly, people contact me when they've got tied up in bureaucracy, and quite often, again, it's sometimes to do with finances where we're working across organisations. We might be there might be aspects of doing stuff with Department of Work and Pension, stuff with us, stuff with other benefits, etc. And it can become quite complex, but we can sort it. And if we can get this right, we sort of talk about, well, how are we going to check that it's happening? I actually am really confident. So often, if I'm wandering through the civic, members of staff will stop me and talk to me about things that have been an irritation for them, something that they want to change, something that they want to get right, how they think things could change. There is an appetite within the organisation to actually work on this, and I don't see it as needing any force or anything other than allowing our staff to have the confidence to say, actually, this needs to change. How can we do it? I've had an idea. We have we have an awful lot of very talented, very committed staff who just want to do the best they can for Vale residents. And in a lot of ways, our role is to enable them to do that. So I share your excitement over going into this. It won't all happen at the beginning of April next year, but we've been working on it for a while, and hopefully people will start to see the changes that they want. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Do we have anybody else who'd like to make a comment on this particular agenda item? No? Okay, that's great. Thank you, everybody, for that. It was an interesting debate. So we are looking at recommendations there for committee to consider the report and Appendix A, and our views were to be referred back to Cabinet for their consideration. So if we can do that collectively, please, Mark. There was an additional recommendation that the leader suggested and Councillor Frank supported, and that was to actually have a meeting to discuss the asset transfer process, to see if we can make it more streamlined and less bureaucratic for community groups. So if we can also put that down as a recommendation to go back to Cabinet. Thank you. Can I have a hand to move then from committee? Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards and Councillor Goodjohn. Marvellous. Right then, so we're now going to go back in time to agenda item 7, which again is the reshaping programme, but it's the Strengthening Communities and it's a response to the Audit Wales reports. So I think we've got Tom to take us through this one. Oh no, it's Helen. Sorry, forgive me. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. And I've just got some slides to there they are, thank you, to share with you, just to take us through the report. We're quite mindful that it's quite a detailed report, and attached to it are 2 appendices as well, so we thought it would be useful just to take members through a few slides. So if I can have the next slide then, please. So this report brings together a piece of work that we brought to this committee and a number of other committees at the end of last year, in terms of looking at how we were responding to a number of Audit Wales reports. So there were 3 All Wales reports that focused on poverty, and they looked very much at sort of corporate responses to it, how local authorities were working with social enterprise and also community resilience. And we also had a 4th report that was a Wales-specific report from Audit Wales about how we worked with the third sector. So we took the opportunity to develop a piece of work bringing the recommendations from all of these reports together, recognising that we were going into the development of a new corporate plan and looking at reshaping. So it felt timely to take this as a very integrated way of looking at it, because we recognised that there was a lot of crossover between it, and particularly about how we work with the community and third sector and social enterprises. So we engaged Compass to work with us to do the engagement on our behalf and to produce the reports, which are attached as appendices A and B. So I can have the next slide then, please. That was just a bit of background. So the work that Compass undertook, and we sort of developed the approach with them and worked very closely with them on that, is they reviewed a number of our key documents, as well as some of the things like the PSB Wellbeing Plan, and took a look at that to have a better understanding about how we worked and how we'd articulated a number of those commitments. They then undertook a range of interviews. So they interviewed officers from across the council who particularly worked with the third sector or social enterprise, or were undertaking roles that were in relation to poverty, to get an understanding of how different parts of the council were approaching this, to help sort of shape what the way forward would be. They also included, as part of that, a meeting with Ardal, as procurement was an element of that. And they also, in terms of looking at how another authority were undertaking some of the work around poverty, spoke to a team within Swansea Council as well, because they had been mentioned within one of the Audit Wales reports. And again, it's sort of looking at how they were approaching that anti-poverty agenda. If I could have the next slide then, please. They also met online with a number of representatives from third sector organisations that we were working with and social enterprise. And part of this was understanding better what their experience of working with the council was, where they thought we could improve, and also where the strengths were within that relationship as well. As part of this work, we also took the opportunity for Compass to engage with town and community councils as well, and they invited all town and community councils to attend a number of focus groups, and I think they spoke to about 9 or 10 in total, to find out what their experience was on a number of matters. And this was particularly around some of the work around sort of working with the community resilience that was highlighted in the Audit Wales reports, and it felt timely in terms of it's getting that overview as an organisation of what the experience of some of our partners was. So they explored, as I say, the barriers and challenges, as well as those opportunities. And again, although we were doing this very much through that lens of poverty as approached to those Audit Wales reports, we also recognised that there was crossover in terms of that relationship across a number of different strands in terms of the work that the council itself. Compass then, once they'd completed the majority of those online interviews, undertook a number of engagement workshops. So they brought council officers together to explore in more detail the work around social enterprises in terms of what the knowledge was about the opportunities of working with social enterprises and understanding of social enterprises and what opportunities there could be, again linked to reshaping, but also the work on poverty. And then under the Health and Social Care Wellbeing Act, the Section 16 requirements are for working more closely with third sector providers. So they facilitated a focus group that was led as well by the head of service within social services about how we can particularly focus on some of the work with social care. And again, this was an element of one of the original Audit Wales report. So as you can see, we were bringing a number of different strands together. And another element was attendance at Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee as well, to discuss some of the initial findings, because we were also looking at how that committee works, and again, as part of that engagement with the third sector and areas for change. The next slide then, please. So, as I mentioned, there's 2 appendices to the Cabinet report that's been referred to this committee. The main report, Appendix A, which presents those key findings and recommendations from that work, and then a separate summary report, which pulls together the work that was undertaken with Town and Community Council. So although that's reflected in the main report, there also is a separate report on that as well. So the next slide then, please. So in terms of the key findings from the interviews that Compass had with council officers, they felt from looking at the strategic documents that they could see that there was an evolution and a shift. So as they looked at sort of the previous annual delivery plan, they could see the move in the current annual delivery plan to that increasing focus on tackling poverty, as well as working more in partnership. They recognised that from those discussions with officers, that what was coming through was, although there was often a lot of work around tackling poverty, it possibly wasn't as joined up as it could be, and often relied on short-term funding. That we had been quick to respond to the cost of living crisis, but there were other aspects of poverty and pockets of deprivation that needed to be considered. And they also, from the conversations that they'd had with officers, and you'll see this reflected as well in some of the conversations with partners, about some of the issues around the asset transfer process and how that could possibly be strengthened. And again, the opportunities for further collaboration with social enterprise and third sector. So they met with officers across the organisation, and that's a flavour of the key themes that were coming through. On the next slide then, I can pick up in terms of the issues that came through with the conversations that they had with our partners. And there were lots of positives from that in terms of who they spoke to, a number of participants and partners feeling that they had strong relationships with council officers in terms of taking the work forward, and had built up those relationships in terms of sort of recognising some of the issues and working through some of the barriers. And they felt that we engage on a number of opportunities, but it often can be uncoordinated and not always consistent. They felt that there were opportunities much more in terms of how they could know where to make contact with the council, so those that were less familiar with working the organisation, in terms of actually how they could share those ideas and work more closely with us. So that was something that we'd be looking to take on board, as you see in our response to the recommendations. And again, about how they could maybe influence the decision making and just strengthen that engagement. The Section 16 workshop, again, highlighted that there were opportunities more around sharing service delivery ideas and commissioning services. And the last point here reflects on the conversations with town and community councils and the desire that was coming through from the representatives that they spoke to be able to influence the decision-making process further. And again, the aspects around community asset transfer. Moving on to the next slide. They've made a number of recommendations within that report. So as I mentioned, one of the key starting points for this work was the Audit Wales reports around tackling poverty. So they recognised that although we had a strong theme within the annual delivery plan that we needed to strengthen in terms of what our work was around tackling poverty and how that was being reported, that the voluntary sector compact needed to be updated, and there needed to be sort of more proactive engagement around that. That there was a need to understand more about the opportunities to work with social enterprise sector and what social enterprises existed within the Vale. So again, that came through from the different interviews that they had, and also the opportunities for closer working on the health and social care side of things through that Section 16 forum, and building again on those Audit Wales reports about clearly defining how we could see work being taken forward around community resilience, as well as part of the tackling poverty agenda. The next slide then details how we're looking to take forward that work. And as you'll have seen from the earlier reports today around the corporate plan and the reshaping work, a number of the recommendations that have come through and the issues are already starting to be addressed through that work, and we're working our way through how we can make those improvements. So with regards to the need to be stronger in terms of our strategic approach to poverty, as we've mentioned earlier, we've strengthened that and built that within the corporate planning process, and it's also assisting in terms of the thinking around reshaping as well. With regards to that, our relationship with the third sector and being clearer about with organisations about what they could expect when working with the council and how we can make those improvements. As we've mentioned already, that is a statement within the corporate plan itself set out under our 4 values, where we're really strengthening that need to work with other organisations and have regard to what their needs might be from us as well. So, for example, with regard to timeliness of information and opportunities. We're recognising as part of the reshaping work, we need to do some further work around understanding social enterprises and what the opportunities might be and how we might be able to develop more information on the website to enable people to find their way into the council more easily as well. So that's something we'll be looking at as well. And the Section 16 forum, the work around that, Ian Macmillan is picking up those aspects as well, and that's being co-chaired by social services and also a third sector member. We're also, as you know, work is underway with regard to procurement through the work with Ardal itself. And then, as you say, within the corporate plan, we've picked up some of those aspects of community resilience as well as through the reshaping programme. So we just really wanted to highlight and bring back to the committee today that work has been undertaken with Compass as we set out last year, that they've undertaken the range of interviews, what their recommendations have been, and how we've proposed that we respond to those recommendations and continue to take forward the work around those aspects. So again, very much focusing on the work around the poverty, but also about how we improve how we work with other organisations as well, which is a critical element of the reshaping programme. So thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I welcome these reports and also the proposed response and the recommended way forward that Council's come up with. I also endorse what Compass is saying, certainly about the value of social enterprises, added value, you might say, because of their social mission and the fact that they will reinvest in our economy in, can I say, a kind way, because that's kind of the ethos of the way they work. So I'm really encouraged to hear that we are looking at that. I think a mapping exercise so that we really understand what we've got out there as recommended by Compass would be helpful, and helping and supporting our social enterprises with pipeline of opportunities as well for them to consider bidding. I mean, the best thing we can do for them is to help them find a market for what they do, and it isn't just about the social services; it's all sorts of different categories, and supporting them to be sustainable. So that takes them out of the moving from one grant to another grant to another grant, because that's not going to help them sustain. So really good news. Councillor Carroll, please, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a question really in relation to the work the Council does in holding the third sector to account, because clearly we're partner organisations, but there is a responsibility for the Council to use its powers and influence to ensure that those organisations deliver on their objectives, because I think quite a lot of the time when it comes to social housing, for example, housing associations like to talk the talk, and there's a lot of virtue signalling and platitudes coming out of them. But when it comes to the core services that they exist to provide, I often find that they're found quite lacking, to be honest with you. To cite an example, the Trem Hyfryd development in Landock is a new development. It's been occupied for a matter of months, and there is already serious mould in that complex. There are dehumidifiers everywhere. There are wires. Residents have to have dehumidifiers installed in their flats, and then they're responsible for paying the electric, and they will have to claim that back retrospectively. And this simply isn't good enough. Frankly, it's a disgrace that in a new complex like that, this has been allowed to happen. Now, I appreciate that these organisations aren't the council. I get that. But my question really is, what work is the authority doing to hold these third sector organisations to account, ensure that we're standing up for our residents and communities, and that when those organisations are found lacking, we do everything within our power to ensure that that is corrected?
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Tom, would you like to come back in? I think
Yes,
Carroll might have frozen here.
Okay, he's come off screen for me, Chess, but hopefully, oh, there we are. Great. I just want to make sure that you're still in the meeting. Okay, Councillor Carroll. Thank you for the question. I can't give you a specific answer relating to that particular development, but if it's useful, I can ask my colleagues in the housing team to contact you separately to follow up on that one. But I know the general point in terms of holding the third sector to account, as you describe. The council got a range of different arrangements in place with third sector organisations. Some of those are on the basis of contracts or service level agreements, and I'm aware that within those particular arrangements there are particular criteria that we expect third sector organisations to deliver or to meet, because we're, as you say, spending public money with them. There are other parts of the council where we'll have arrangements with the third sector that are more partnerships where they are working with us on certain activities. And I'm thinking about some of the grant schemes, for example, where we would agree terms of reference with them, and then we would monitor and evaluate how they've performed against those. So I know they're quite generic answers to the question, but I just wanted to give you a flavour of the arrangements that are in place. But certainly if it's useful with regards to the particular housing scheme that you were referencing, I can ask my colleagues to follow up with you directly.
Yeah, I have been dealing with housing on this, and I've also dealt with Havard themselves. I'm less than impressed with Havard, to be honest with you. You won't be surprised to hear that, given what I've said before, but it's very disappointing.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Do we have any other questions, please, on this particular report? Councillor Goodjohn, over to you.
Yeah, just to say that I very much welcome this working with external organisations, and the more that we can do that, the better we will be at understanding ourselves from an external lens of looking at how not only do we see ourselves, but what good practice can we learn from that we may not be aware of. So this is really good. It's good to see, and it's a good approach to take to more things in the future, I hope. I think there's quite a lot that's important there that we don't hear an honest reflection of very often. I think that the reflection on how town and community councils see the Vale of Glamorgan Council as an organisation is quite raw there, in particularly the second document referring to town and community councils, and I think is an honest appraisal about the current situation. And I think that a rehabilitation of the relationship between town and community councils and the Vale of Glamorgan Council is necessary if we're going to return into a more functioning state. The committee, whose name I've entirely forgotten now, with town and community councils in it, because I don't know how that's slipped my mind. I have no idea. Anyway, I think that is an absolutely crucial part of what we do. The other thing I'm going to mention, because it's in the report, is procurement. I think that we need to be more creative with how we take procurement in the future, and the idea of working with town and community councils on procurement, with working with our partners on procurement, is a very good point that I think needs to be taken forward by the organisation as well. So good piece of work. I want to see more of this in the future because I think it's a good reflection on how we're actually performing as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. I think you were looking for One Voice for Wales, weren't you, when you were talking
Community
about
Liaison Committee, but close enough.
That's fine. Thank you. Tom, do you want to come in on any of those comments made by Councillor Goodjohn there? They're all.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Certainly, in terms of just very briefly on the procurement aspect, absolutely that more creative, innovative approach, and certainly when Helen was describing the Section 16 forum within social care, I know at their most recent meeting, it was that was a very productive discussion about how we can involve social enterprise within the procurement process. We can look at co-producing some of that, those procurement opportunities where we're able to give access indeed to smaller organisations by changing some of the processes that we're adopting. And I know committee have taken a real interest in the revised procurement policy as part of your task and finish group, and certainly I hope you'll start to see some of the points that Helen was raising being picked up there. In terms of the reflections within the report, it's intended to be a really open and honest piece of work. We wanted to understand what other organisations and partners experience in terms of working with the organisation, and that's why you then see it being reflected in that reshaping programme and that really important statement within the corporate plan as well. So hopefully members can see the direction of travel, and it's a positive one. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And you will be pleased to know that procurement reform and the social partnership bill, which will be coming in next February, explicitly makes it easier for us as a local authority to engage pre-tender with businesses, social enterprises, and it also makes it incumbent on us to make these considerations so that we don't make things overly complicated and in a way prevent smaller businesses, SMEs, social enterprises from bidding. So these are all things that are in the legislation that will make life easier for them and also for us so that we can include everybody. Also, the requirement to publish a pipeline of opportunities is another thing that we're going to have to do as a matter of course. So, so there's some really good changes on the horizon, which will aid us in procurement and also our small businesses. Do we have any other questions then on this particular report, please? Okay. No? Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I think the recommendations were, as with the last one, that any of our views and comments are to be returned to Cabinet for their consideration. So if we can do a summary of committee's comments, if that's okay, Mark, that would be great. Thank you very much. So do we have a hand to move to the next agenda item, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you, Councillor Hanks. Okay. So moving on then, agenda item 9 now, I think, is our first and second quarter scrutiny decision tracker for recommendations and also our updated work programme schedule. As we know, we've got 2 reports that we are deferring to next month, so that will be included in our November meeting. I think, Mark, have we got just a summary for everybody to share?
I've got a short summary that I'll obviously just relay to members now, just to highlight the sort of key points. So bear with me a second, Chair, I'll just bring that up.
Thank you.
as you've already alluded to, Chair, this report is the combined Q1 and Q2 update for Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, in order to report the progress made on scrutiny recommendations and to consider the updated forward work programme. Starting with the recommendation tracking, which is appendices A through to C for quarters 1 and 2, 24-25. It can be seen now that the majority of these have been completed, where we have a small number of recommendations that are still in progress or ongoing. These have been updated in the relevant appendices in order to give committee the most recent information that we have on them. In terms of the recommendation for that part of the report, the recommendation is for members to consider the status of the actions listed in appendices A to C to the report and to be agreed by members. Moving on to the forward work programme for the committee, which is Appendix D for 24-25. There are a number of references, presentations and or reports of note that will be coming to the committee during the remainder of 24-25, which are in the work programme table at the appendix, with details concerning the purpose of the reports, their origins and any details around slippage, etc. Just to bring to the attention of the committee some potential changes. I hope they will agree prior to it being the latest iteration being uploaded. The medium-term financial plan, we've been advised now by finance colleagues, will move to December. It was originally, I believe, in November. So we'll be asking committee that we amend that date on the table prior to being uploaded. We also, as you've already alluded to, Chair, the 2 references to reports from tonight's meeting will also move following deferral to November's plan meeting. So that's the Corporate Asset Management Plan Annual Update and the Carbon Management Plan. Just moving on, bear with me a second. It's also important to note that with the work programme schedule, this is a proposed list of items for consideration and may be subject to change depending on prevailing circumstances. In terms of the recommendation for that part of the report, the report recommends that the updated forward work programme schedule for 24-25 attached to Appendix D be approved and uploaded to the Council's website, obviously subject to those proposed changes if yourself, Chair, and the committee agreed to those. Other areas of consideration in the report, we also referred to the requests for consideration and call-in processes, which I believe are paragraphs 2.7 to 2.8. The work of the Scrutiny Committee Chairs and Vice Chairs Group regarding broadening the work programmes for scrutiny committees, paragraph 2.11, and the relaunch of the Scrutiny Topic Suggestion Form, paragraph 2.12. Also of note is the action outlined in the Scrutiny and Cabinet Protocol agreed by Cabinet on the relaunch and implementation of, for example, specific meetings with the Cabinet portfolio holders to be arranged with Scrutiny Committee Chairs and Vice Chairs on a regular basis, and as part of this, on a biannual basis with the Leader, Deputy Leader, Cabinet members and Scrutiny Committee Chairs and Vice Chairs, in order to allow both the Cabinet and Scrutiny forward work programmes to be developed and agreed, and for discussions to take place having regard to Council priorities, which we go into detail in paragraph 2.13. Members are also provided with the link to the published versions of the forward work programmes for this and other scrutiny committees on the Council's website, which is on paragraph 2.19 of the report. So that's a short whistle-stop tour of the key points of the report and appendices. Happy to take any questions or other comments from members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. I'm happy to accept that report as it is. I don't have any comments. I'm happy to recommend, as you've suggested, that that we hear the medium-term financial plan in December. And as we've already discussed, we will be including in November's meeting the corporate asset management plan and the carbon management plan that we were going to be debating today. So does anybody... Sorry, Mark, go on.
No, Chair. So just coming on. That's all.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were going to tell me something then.
No,
So I
no.
don't know if anyone else has any comments or questions for Mark on this report. No? Okay, that's great. Okay, that's fine. So if we can just move on this one, if we'll have a hand to move, then we'll. Thank you, Councillor Good John. Marvellous. Agenda item 10 then. Now, those are items the Chair's decided are urgent part 1. There aren't any, everybody. Part 2, the public and press possible exclusion one. There aren't any other agenda items on there either. So I just want to thank everybody for their contributions tonight. I think it's been a constructive meeting as ever. Thanks very much for all of your participation there. And just to confirm, the date of the next meeting then will be November the 20th, Wednesday, November the 20th. So that's great. Everybody have a really nice evening and take care, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.